Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to wait just a couple of moments, just as some of you filter through this afternoon. And then once all is said and done, then we'll be able to start today's session. Okay, so just as you see on the screen here for today's session, please be aware that you are being recorded. Automatically your camera and your microphone will be automatically switched off, as we'll be sharing both presentation and discussion in today's webinar. After today's webinar, as you notice, it's being recorded. There will be a link provided at some point in time where you can access the recording to play back any bits that you find interesting from today's event. Also, there is a Slido number that I will share with you in just a moment, but please use Slido to ask either myself or Adah any questions that come up. And please, we encourage you to use the chat functions with other attendees to converse with anything that you have heard today. So without further ado, I think, 2 minutes past 1, we'll start today's session. So we'll begin. So good afternoon, everyone. It's been a while. Happy New Year. Well, we're in March, but Happy New Year. Welcome to today's event, which is our next instalment of the Critical Conversations webinar series. Today, it's called Inspiring Inclusion, in line with celebrating International Women's Day, which takes place tomorrow, with none other than MHFA England Chair Adah Parris. I just want to issue a content warning very, very quickly that today's content contains mentions of sexual assault, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, eating disorders, anxiety, abuse and violence, trauma, body image and substance abuse and addiction, which may include either mentions of alcohol or drug use, which may be triggering. So at any point in time, if content is triggering, please feel free to step away. And I'm sure we'll be able to welcome you at a different webinar on a very different day. But other than that, of course, if you do require any mental health support, please feel free to message myself privately, and we can get that underway. So without further ado, we're going to go to the next slide, please. So Slido will be our best friend here. So please follow the link and the code there. We'll be able to manage some of the questions a bit better. You can vote for the questions that kind of stand out to you all most. And then, we'll get the show started, really, or we'll finish the show, I suppose, or to do the Q&A. Now, you've seen Adah. She has popped herself beautifully on the screen. But today's conversation will be with, as I've mentioned before, our MHFA Chair, Adah Parris. And I want to introduce you to her before she introduces herself to the space on who she is. So in 2020 and 2021, Adah was long listed as one of the most influential women in UK technology. In 2019, she was recognised as one of TED Talk's global emerging innovators. In 2018, she was recognised as one of the UK's top 100 Black minority and ethnic leaders in technology. Adah takes a philosophical and anthropological approach to technology, merging logic and creativity to design immersive storytelling, learning and development environments, cultures in which her clients and audiences become critical thinkers, philosophers, and immersive storytellers, problem solvers, and innovators. Adah has over 20 years of experience in transforming cultures to nurture decentralized, humanity-centered innovation environments, and she has worked with businesses and individuals in advertising, education, entertainment, entrepreneurship, marketing, media, and technology startups. Her clients and partnerships have included Google, Unilever, Sainsbury's, Oath, Ogilvy Labs. I hope I said that correctly.
Ogilvy Labs, yes.
There we go. Ogilvy Labs, thank you. The British Council, the EU Council, the Tate Modern, the British Film Institute, the Union Chapel, the Burning Man Camp Playground, ArabNet Dubai, Innovative Finance, Wayra UK, the Friday Club, and Shambhala Festival. And as I've said for the 500th time, she's also our chair at MHFA England. So before I carry on, Adah, please introduce yourself to the folks in the space.
Wow, thank you, Chantal. Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you in this beautiful space. And as we lead up to International Women's Day. So as Chantal has said, there's lots of things that I've done. I think that best way to introduce myself is that I help people to see the world differently. And I do that through asking one question, which I feel that I've tried to articulate since I was a child, which is, what type of ancestor do you want to be? And so the way that I do that is through being non-executive, so the chair for MHFA England. I do lots of keynote talks around the world, around ecology, technology, innovation, and art. As I was saying to Chantal and Erin, I've just finished writing a really interesting article this morning about, can artificial intelligence be funny? And I've also recently discovered that I'm a bit of an artist. And so I am enjoying expressing myself through painting, through creating soundscapes, and just stepping outside of my comfort zone and seeing what is possible at the other side of that discomfort. So I am really looking forward to this conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adah. And of course, the second speaker is me, Chantal, for those who are new to the space. Hi, I'm MHFA England's Diversity and Inclusion Specialist. Not diversity, sorry, Equity and Inclusion Specialist. So next slide, please, to give a little bit of context as to why we're here today. So tomorrow is International Women's Day. But International Women's Day has a unique and important celebration message and ethos in particular. So the celebration in itself takes place during Women's History Month, and Women's History Month is also in the month of March. And International Women's Day is here to acknowledge the contributions and achievements of women worldwide and to challenge gender inequity. Now, International Women's Day was originally titled National Women's Day and has been celebrated for over 100 years and was first proposed by Theresa McLeod in 1909 to commemorate a workers' protest in 1857. Now, inspired by the suggestion of a National Women's Day, activists Louise Zietz, Clara Zetkin, and Kate Dunker suggested an annual Women's Day. After that, over 100 women delegates from 17 countries agreed to the suggestions as a means to promote women's rights and suffrage, which is the right to vote. And on March 1911, International Women's Day was officially marked for the first time, with more than 1 million people celebrating across nations like Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland. The United Nations recognized International Women's Day in 1975. And in 1977, the United Nations invited members to proclaim March 8th as the UN Day for Women's Rights and World Peace. So as you see on the screen here, Inspiring Inclusion is the campaign theme for International Women's Day, whereas the UN's official theme of observance is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress, which I think can converge really well in the conversation that Adah and I have today. So today and tomorrow, and what we hope is a yearly commitment, serves as an action call to challenge gender disparities in our workplaces, communities, quality of life, and also in our own spheres of influence. Next slide, please. So there'll be a few facts on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in 2024, we are still seeing a variety of gender-based inequalities against women, and these disparities pose a significant impact to women's mental health. Now, intersectionality, a framework coined by scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, encourages us to think about the way that overlapping systems of oppression and violence impact an individual's quality to lives. So what that means is that life will look and will feel different to, in the context of International Women's Day, will look and feel different to a neurodivergent Black woman, and will feel different to, as it will feel different to a white woman, as it will feel different to a disabled queer woman, for example. Intersectionality encourages us to collectively act as a society and challenge these systems of oppression and violence, such as ableism, sexism, racism, and femicide, to create a better society for all. Now, with all of these statistics that you've seen on this screen here, we see in every facet, whether that be reproductive health, healthcare, in body image, in society and in general, we see as well in abuse as well, that there is a lot that is still to be done when it comes to women's mental health. Next slide, please. Thank you. Furthermore, Stonewall's prescription for change, as you see on the board here, in the context of the LGBTQ plus women. There are higher rates of suicidal thoughts and self-harm in comparison to women in general, and there is a the risk of long-term mental health conditions in England for transgender women are every 1 in 6, which is, again, as I'm sure we can all agree in this space, because we're in this space, is not good enough in terms of what we can do to create a equitable society. Now, in talking about that as well, there are more statistics which include, diet culture, postpartum pressures, body image issues. With that, we see the lack of visual representation of older women, which are all things which women have statistically shared that cause people to suffer with body image issues in that space as well. Including that, there is an estimation of around 13 million people who are currently peri or menopausal in the UK, according to the Wellbeing of Women in their study, which is equivalent to 1/3 of the UK female population. Now, menopause can cause a wide range of physical and psychological symptoms and can last for years. And again, with the disparities we're seeing in the context of intersectionality, when we look at the racial lens on discussing menopause, which I know Adah's going to touch on a little bit later, there is a large gap in representation for Black, Asian, and Indigenous women, and also in the academic space in terms of research around menopause as well. Currently, as it stands, 9 in 10 women are not taught about menopause. That's again another huge gap in what am I saying? Developing awareness in this topic. And then the next slide, please, Erin. Thank you. And then another bit of context, really, to sort of solidify our conversation here, is that in furthering and more conversations around women's mental health, sexual assault. In an investigation by the UN Women UK, a study found that 97% of women aged between 18 and 24 have been sexually harassed, with a further 96% of those not reporting those situations because of the belief that it would not change anything. Now, if that data pool expanded to a wider age range, I personally would fear the numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers were similar to what we're seeing here on the board today. But again, it talks to the issue that systems of oppression are overlinked. Body image, sexual harassment, this is all linked to what we are currently living in a heteronormative patriarchal society, which rewards behaviors like this. And again, sexual harassment, anything that is harming to the autonomy of women and our mental health and our bodies is not okay. So that is just some of the facts, some of the basics on why we're here today, and what I hope. I hope that all of you in this space are inspired in some degree, but what I hope is that you take away something from this conversation, and hopefully we can provide a bit more clarity into what we've shared and what I've shared with some of the information that I've presented today. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the questions. So Erin, if you could take the slides off, please. Thank you so much for sharing them. We'll come back to the slides at the very end of today's session. But I wanted to sort of open the floor, really. So Adah, you've introduced yourself to the audience, but I want to ask you, what makes Adah Adah, and what made you want to be the chair at MHFA England?
Thank you. Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for setting the context for this conversation, because I think it's really important that we have that background information, so that we like to assume that everybody turns up with good intent, and that actually people are coming to learn, and so we also have to recognize that sometimes people can be a little bit clumsy in language and ideas. So it's really good to start with setting the context. Bit about me. So I am 52 years old, menopausal. And I think I'll leave the intersectional bit and come back to that. But if my mother was here, she would say that as a child, I was a social justice warrior. So even before I could explain what it was, the thing that would make me cry is injustice, whether it's for another human or animals or nature or any of those things. I just remember this little version of me, glasses and afro puffs, and just getting mad at the way that things were happening. And so that's always been something that's deep inside of me, that ability to care deeply, to see deeply, to feel deeply. And over a period of time, I have now learned other ways of expressing that. Um, Early career was, well, degree, pure and applied maths and educational studies. I was training to be a primary school teacher. I loved that sense of helping educate and motivate and all of those things, but didn't like the education system. So scrap that. But really wanted to understand how people learn and think and develop and grow and create those spaces where people feel seen and heard and not judged. And so I've always had that in me. Then say little, I worked at London Business School for 6 years, helping to build the marketing program, studied there, worked in advertising, worked in tech. And so the earlier part of my career is really interesting that many people would have looked at it at that time, that I'm just jumping around. But now I understand that I recognize patterns. And so each job I've had has fed into another thing. And as a part of that, as I moved into these other spaces, my confidence grew. And I had some great mentors because I was a person who helped to build other people's legacies.
Mm.
And as a Black woman in those spaces, I thought one day someone's going to recognize that I'm doing a great job and they're going to reward me. And it's going to be great. And that doesn't really happen, and not for us. And so I had some beautiful mentors who said to me, I've got your back.
Mm.
You speak your truth, you ask questions, you see things differently, just speak that truth. And so I started to ask questions, but at the same time, I was also becoming more myself.
Mm.
Because for a long time, I was in places where I was in the minority.
Yeah.
I would say that I don't class myself as an ethnic minority. I'm a person of the global majority
Yeah.
because numbers matter. And so if you're going to talk about numbers, let's do it right. Numbers matter. So I am a person of the global majority. Sometimes I will say a Black woman, but there's lots of different ways and it's very personal. And I started to so I worked for other organizations and then I started to get asked to give talks about how I built my personal brand identity. And I'd never seen myself as a brand. I didn't even know what that really meant. I was just being me. And what that meant is that I am a geek. I grew up wanting to be an astronaut because I fell in love with Mr. Spock, live long and prosper. And I am a huge geek when it
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
to those things.
I love
I
that.
I I was talking about it the other day. I still somewhere I think in my mum's cellar, I have a project that I did on Halley's Comet because I wanted to understand all of that stuff.
Wow.
So something about me is that I've always asked questions and always gone, well, I don't understand why.
Yeah.
Why do I have to believe this? And so as a result, I ended up doing lots of talks about personal brand identity, started to really bring in this conversation about technology and what does that mean and where's the human in that. And somehow someone at MHFA England found me and introduced me to Simon. And so this was February 2020, so
Wow.
before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
Zero.
Simon, yeah, so and it's really a very clear moment because it was just before we knew what was
Yeah.
really happening. And so Simon interviewed me for the podcast, My Whole Self podcast. And we had a great chat. And as you can tell, I love talking anyhow. But Simon and I were having this conversation, and he talked about my whole self.
Yeah.
And I said, well, it's okay for you as a white guy, gay guy, to be able to say my whole self and bring yourself into organizations and stuff. But for me, as a Black woman who has many intersectional identities, it's not always safe. And so we have to think, I choose to think bigger and deeper about the levels of privilege within all of that. And so we had this beautiful conversation. I'm really glad that Simon was very open to that. And so at the end of the conversation, Simon said, well, our chair is leaving. Why don't you apply? If you really want us to do something different and to see things differently, apply to be chair. And I was like, oh crap. All right. What, me? I'm the wild card. I don't come from this sector. I don't have that. But by this time, I had built a really big platform,
Yeah.
speaking at conferences around the world, and saw that I have the opportunity to get into places where other people don't, and to be able to use this and to think about, how I can use my voice to influence. Plus, and I'm very public about this, I had 4 burnouts.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that the first one, I didn't even know that I was burnt out. What happened was backache, and I thought it's easier to
Uh,
be at home and all these things. So it was a combination of the challenge from Simon and me going, okay, you know what? Yes, I'm going to go for this. And so said yes, and then we had the pandemic, and then we had George Floyd, and there was all these other things happening. And I have to say that MHFA England had already started its anti-racist journey before I came along. So I knew what was happening there, and I was like, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to be a part of the change,
yeah.
for me to use my platform and my voice, and the fact that I have a very strong Southeast London accent. I'm born in Lewisham. I'm a local, that I'm that kind of person that you don't normally see as the chair of an organization. And I'm like, why the hell not? Why not me? So I have met with the panel. I had different interviews, and with Simon, I was like, right, okay, well, this is who I am. So my intersectional, I'm neurodiverse. I have uh quite profound ADHD and dyslexic and dyspraxic and borderline autism.
Mm,
I am polyamorous and openly so. I initially identified, and this is where this idea of understanding your own identity comes from. Initially, I was identified with the political understanding of queerness in terms of this idea of social constructs of gender norms. I was like, it's a load of nonsense.
mm,
This idea of holding on to this. And so, but now with my own identity, I identify as queer as well. And I go to festivals and I make headdresses and I love a good dance. And at the same time, I used to run events at the House of Lords, and I've done all this stuff. And so bringing my full self is going, you're going to get all of that.
yeah.
And went, okay, let's do it.
That is,
Simon and the board, it wasn't just down to him, it was the board. And I met your old chair, and they went, okay, let's go.
yeah, that is amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that, Ada. And to everyone else that's listening in this space, I'm sure you can identify with me when I say like there are plenty hats um,
Yeah,
that you are wearing, Ada, and what you shared earlier about sort of the piece on even though you had a direction in terms of going into primary school teaching, it was like the universe or just your steps were ordered in a way that kind of led you to where you are now and finding yourself, finding, your identity, finding your career path, finding all the
yeah,
bits that make you you. So yeah, that's incredible. And thank you for sharing that really. It's been great to sort of work with you and get to know you as well in this
thank you.
space, influence event together. So great stuff. That leads us pretty nicely into our next question.
Yeah.
Uh, so, do you think International Women's Day is important? If so, why? If not, why not?
It's really interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Dr. Kate Stone, the other day, and we was actually talking about artificial intelligence. And what was really interesting was that we both got to this point of going, you know what? The answer is always yes and no.
Yeah.
We've got to stop with these binaries, these binary ideas, because we have got to a place where people want to argue that they're right, and then you get everything else gets lost behind. So whilst I recognize and understand and accept that we are in a place where we need to have International Women's Day,
Mhm,
it also pisses me off,
mhm,
because why do we need to have it? If we really say that if we are honest in the want, need, and desire to have equity across, different ways. And what I mean by equity is that that's not, a homogeneous society where everybody is the same. What
Yeah.
I mean is that everybody has equal opportunities.
Yeah.
Then we need to do things to change the system and structures, because we can't just keep creating mentoring programs to fix us as women as if we're broken
Yeah.
without changing the systems and structures. So it
Right.
has to be both. So it has to be yes and no. And, when in your introduction, you mentioned that 1909, certain dates you mentioned just really
Yeah.
struck me, because 1909 and 1975, well, I was born in 1971. So does that mean prior to 1975, what, we didn't exist as women?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that is as society sees us as women, and how we identify.
Yeah.
Because one of the people that I admire, Sojourner Truth,
Yeah.
abolitionists, slave, former
Yeah.
slave.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 1851, she gave a talk where she talked about "Ain't I a Woman?" This division of, yeah, okay, women, this idea of women. And then within that, there becomes these divisions of, well, my version of womanhood is on a hierarchy more than your version of womanhood.
Yeah.
And what it does is it means that we are infighting with ourselves, which, divide and conquer. We don't need this. We've
Yeah.
got to stop.
Yeah.
So whilst, yes, International Women's Day is powerful and it is the collective voice, there is also still power in the voice of one,
Yeah.
way that we show up and the way that we choose to show up.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Ada. And just to add on what you've shared, really, according to the World Economic Forum's gender gap report that they released last year, it will take 131 years from 2023 to reach gender parity, which isn't good enough.
Yeah,
It isn't good enough, and to you've mentioned this, I've shared the context behind International Women's Day, and what you shared about Sojourner Truth with her speech in the 1800s. In celebrating International Women's Day, because I feel that it's important in essence, there is a, and you've already identified this, there's a missing link in terms of an intersectional lens of feminism.
yeah,
Because if intersectional feminism is missing from the conversation piece in what womanhood is and in what International Women's Day is, solidarity through campaigns like International Women's Day can't be achieved on just relying on what mainstream feminism is,
yeah,
on what the large majority of social discourse is saying. And again, that mainstream feminism is through the lens of whiteness, which is socially conditioned through the system of racism and colonialism and all of that, and the like. But in excluding that intersectional lens on feminism, we excluding the voices of the disabled, of the LGBTQIA plus community, of women of the global majority. And we've seen a lot, and I'm glad that you've raised Sojourner Truth as one of the pioneers of feminism. We see the erasure of black women and brown women and women of color that have supported the feminist movement, like Marsha P. Johnson, like Angela Davis, like Patricia Hill Collins.
yeah.
uh,
And we are still, and yes, and we are
yeah.
Black women, the two of us here, we
Mm,
are only mentioning Black women, Black and brown
mm,
women. So there are so many
so many people that have just been
people,
erased.
people, women, people, non-binary people who have been and are part of this struggle. And what irritates me is when people feel that there's only one pie that we're all fighting for, and this is mine. And
Yeah.
if I have this, if I share this with you, then it means that I'm losing out. Why do we have to lose out?
No one.
It's about, there's growth and there is learning and there is creativity and inspiration and all these sorts of things
Yeah.
that come from the beauty of the diversity. So yes, we have to remember that we are, first and foremost, we're all human. That's
Yeah.
that's the most basic
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
that on a microscopic level, we would not exist without diversity.
Yeah.
This would not
Yeah.
exist without diversity. So
Yeah.
everything else is a choice.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about these things, it's important to recognize that we are still talking from positions of privilege because we are able to have this conversation here.
Yeah.
And there are many voices that aren't represented in many of the conversations. And that's why I said yes to MHFA England. And that's why I said yes to being one of the first things I said to Simon when finally we agreed, it was agreed that I would be chair, is that I see my position as chair as a role of activism. And it's not about going on protest marches. That's one side of it. It is about believing in bigger than me and understanding that the voices and the experiences of those of others doesn't have to be mine.
Yeah.
It's also understanding that sometimes I'm in a position of power, and so sometimes I have to think about what do I say or not say with my MHFA hat on, and
Mm.
what do I say externally? Because I've also got to think bigger about the vision and the mission and of the organization. So
Yeah.
there may be things sometimes that I feel I really want to say,
Mhm.
but as chair of MHFA England, I cannot say it under that umbrella. So
Mhm.
I think creatively about how I can do that. And sometimes it's about the things that happen behind the scenes. So
Mhm.
there are things that I'm involved in organizations with many of the global conflicts that are happening right now that I don't talk about, but I'm involved in bringing together. I'm in a very particular women's group that brings together women from various sides of the divide and the current wars that are going on in various places.
Mm.
I'm in that group to help us look at how can we actually, as women
Mhm.
together, try and think about how we change things. And also, what's the mental health part of that? How are we ensuring
Yeah.
that there are psychologically safe spaces for
Yeah.
difference to exist
Yeah.
without the further marginalization of our experiences or our knowledge or our wisdom or all of those things?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And even to touch on the part about mental health, there is so much disparity, and to think about the various injustices that are going on across the world, which, to those who are affected both here and where they're all happening, also take a profound effect on mental health as well,
Yeah.
Um, to even, share a couple of facts on top of that, you know, Black British women are more likely to experience a common mental health problem at 29% in comparison to white British women at 21% and non-British white women at 16%. Asian and British Asian adults have been screened more positively for PTSD in comparison to their white counterparts. There is so much going on, and there is so much hurt and trauma that is being compounded more and more and more in society and politics at large, that things, events like this conversation today and networks like you've described are imperative to ensuring that discourse from here on out is a constructive discourse,
Yeah.
where we can actually
Yeah.
find solutions and things to really help people, but also question the inequalities that we're seeing in our world.
Yeah, and another, I can't remember the statistic, but another insight that I saw this week is that there is a spike in the number of young Black people who have eating disorders in this country. There is a spike in that happening. And so these are, we have to recognize that there are so many um levels of violence in the world that aren't always physical. There is emotional, there is psychological, there are all these things. And the way that I look at the world is that everybody has experienced trauma. They are
Yes.
very different, regardless of your ethnicity, your gender, what have you. There are all sorts of things that happen
Mhm.
out there. And it's interesting. I just a very dear friend of mine said to me, and it's something that kind of keeps me grounded, is that the only we the thing that we have no choice in is the lottery of where we are born and to whom we are born and when we are born. You know, we have no control over that. And everything else then becomes this big, um, often nebulous kind of idea of
Mhm.
social construct. You know, you are this person because society has said that you
Yeah.
are, you know, whether you believe that or feel that or not. And so all of these things can take a toll on
Yeah.
people's mental health and well-being. And look, I want to also recognize that there are beautiful things that come out of these, you know, these conversations, because it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, there is a seriousness, but there is also power in the collective voices, in recognizing that there is a difference, there is a diversity of lived experience, and how do we celebrate this? And you know, I'm sure well, let me speak for myself. I have many different groups of women that I, you know, am a part of. I
Mhm.
have my Black
Mhm.
sisters, and we connect in a very particular way, and we have a lived experience where we don't have to talk about the nuances of our lived experience. I have groups that are multi-faith, actually international, different, you know, all sorts. And one in particular is probably about 100 of us now that we talk about menopause like you would not believe. We've been friends for more than 10 years, and I'm one of the older ones, one of the elders. And so I started my menopause journey early. And I started my journey at 47, and I'm now 53, 52. And I started talking about it clearly, openly. And at first it was like, oh, well, what is this thing? Now the younger ones who are in their 30s are going, thank God you lot are talking about it, because now I understand how to advocate for myself. Now I understand the questions I need to ask. So there are ways that we can turn those situations into moments of education, moments of learning, moments of helping to shortcut the crap that we've been through, so that somebody else can, you can't take away someone else's journey and you can't do it for them, but at least you can create a space where they have. My mom used to say to me, I'm the eldest of three, I always want you to have informed choice. I
Yeah.
always want you to know that you are making a decision based on experience, based on choice, because the most difficult thing that happens for any of us is that we have our choices removed. I
Yeah.
think the biggest problems we have in the world, whether climate change, gender, what have you, is perception of value and perception of impact.
Yeah.
And it is based on the voices and the power and the governance of a global minority in saying what is, what should be, and
Yeah.
creating these North Stars.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
But I'm going
Yeah.
to there because, you know, I could rant on, but I think it's important to give the context of both sides of things. While, yes, it can be difficult and there are traumas, there are also things that we
Yeah.
celebrate and
Yeah.
recognize and support each other.
Of course. Thank you, Ada. Which again, that leads us quite nicely into our next question. So, you know, as we've said in different contexts even, womanhood isn't a monolith.
Yeah.
So, how has your experience of womanhood influenced who you are today?
Um, so I grew up, I'm very fortunate that my mother brought us up with life is about experiences, not things. And so, you know, even my niece and nephew, when they were little, it was like, how's your day been? It's been productive. I've done this, I've done that. So it was always about that. I grew up in Southeast London,
Yeah.
went to convent school, taught by nuns, the whole thing.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And interestingly,
like with nuns as like your teachers.
sorry?
What's that like having nuns as teachers?
I mean, they're just people, right? I mean, but then you have the added bit of there is a church attached to the school, and we went to church every feast day that I didn't even know who they were, but we were going to church, and we had, you know, it's you don't know any different when you're in it because that's what you know. So with hindsight, looking at it, it can be very different. But I now knowing that I am neurodivergent,
Yeah.
my experience of growing up was always one of sensory. So I connected with senses and what have you. And my mum now would say, or still says, that my biggest heartache as a child was not understanding how I couldn't fit in. I
Mm,
didn't know I couldn't, and now I understand that's the autism and that's all the other bits and pieces. But I was never bullied.
mm,
I got on with everybody, but still there was this, I'm on the outside and I
yeah.
couldn't understand the social nuance. I don't understand social nuances of conversation and things and banter and all. I don't get it.
Mm,
But when I was younger, and also because I have, I'm older, I have a different understanding of life and language and everything. So there was always this bit about, I don't get it. And was always, you know, I was always the little sister to all of these guys. And at the time, it was only guys that I fancied. And, and I was like, well,
yeah.
why does nobody fancy me? And it was like, yeah, well, you're our little sis. I'm like, oh, that's not what I want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not what I want to hear.
That's
I want
great.
somebody to fancy me.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
wrong? And it's like,
Yeah.
and as I got older, and speaking to them, they're like, oh, well, you're our little sis because we know we can't mess about with you. We got to be straight with you. And I was
Yeah.
like, now you're just telling me that you're dogs. So,
Mm,
but
mm,
it was this thing of never feeling quite feminine enough. And I
yeah.
didn't understand, I didn't fit in a social way. And I
Yeah.
didn't understand why there was this difference. And so for a long time, I was like, well, I'm not feminine enough. And really took that to heart because society's portrayal of feminine was something else. And look, I'm Black, I've got a big nose,
Mm,
beautiful nose, beautiful features,
beautiful. Yeah.
big lips. I love my lips,
Mm,
but when I was younger, the pressures of society and growing up in was very different. And so I wasn't accepted in certain
yeah.
spaces, and I took that to heart. And so it was really difficult.
Yeah.
Now, I think I said to you when we were planning this session, I found myself in my 50s. I'm not saying people have to wait that long, but I definitely know who I am now. I
Yeah.
love who I am. I feel like I am more feminine than I have ever been. And I enjoy the playfulness of it. But I'm not going to lie, the earlier bits were difficult and very um lonely because I just didn't get it. And also and you will appreciate this as well, I'll speak from a Black culture, there was also colorism. So, and for those who don't know colorism, there's this kind of there's this hierarchy of closeness to the proximity to whiteness. So the lighter you are, the straighter your hair are, you are perceived to be prettier. And so the darker you are, and it still happens today, the darker you are, the you're seen as less pretty
Mm,
and you are treated that way.
mm,
And so you had these and you're talking about intersectionality, you had these layers
yeah.
of
Yeah.
just crap
Yeah.
that you had to constantly try and battle whilst you're trying to find your own identity.
Yeah.
So it's all of these things that make me who I am now. It's all of these things that why I said yes to be in the chair of
Yeah.
MHFA England, because I'm like, I know the crap that I went through. And I being very transparent, I've spoken about it publicly. I had 13 years of abusive relationships
Oh my
and
God.
lost my identity and didn't know who I was and didn't speak to my family and came out of that, fortunately, in a way that I went, I am never going to allow myself to be in those situations again. And I will do everything in my power to try and recognize those things and create spaces where people feel seen and heard and believed. And that's why the only thing I know to be is an activist.
Yeah.
And it's not something I sit down and try and work out. It's it runs through my blood because of my own lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Adah, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But I'm happy that through the power of community that you were able to really overcome, and to sort of add on to what you shared in these answers. We are Time is flying away. I'm like, we've still got a couple of questions in the Q&A to go.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, let's.
But anyways, in your piece, Cyborg Shamanism, a manifesto for women, you proudly say we are more than the slaves, servants, nannies, nursemaids, mothers, sisters, daughters, aunts, and wives, here to be defined and valued in relation to someone else. And to add on to that, that speaks to that kind of needing to be attached to someone, speaks to the heteronormative patriarchal construct,
Yeah,
which women are only valued by what we can give, and that's not the case. There is, as you've said, as I've said, there's so much dimension
yeah.
to womanhood, really.
I jump in. So and I think it's important to say that my relationship with my mother changed dramatically when
Mm,
I suddenly started to see her as Tessa, not my
yeah,
mum, who came
yeah,
to this country. She's the eldest of 12, who came to this country on her own at 19, went
yeah,
up to Scotland to train to be a nurse, and then had me at 23.
yeah,
And there was something about that shift of not putting my mother in the role of mother or my father's, wife or all of this stuff, but seeing her as herself. And that's why I think this International Women's Day is also important, because we are, you are Chantal, not the other labels that
yeah,
people will put on you. And it's really important to remember that, because that's when we forget that,
yeah.
it's when we lose ourselves.
100%. I completely agree with you. And to even speak onto, my own womanhood and my own experience, mine is slightly different, with what we spoke about with intersectionality. Just because we are two Black women doesn't mean that we share the same identity or the same sort of journey. Just
Yeah,
as, we can't generalize Black women, we can't generalize white women, we can't generalize Asian women, we can't generalize disabled people, the LGBTQ plus community,
yeah,
and the such. But with mine, it was slightly different because I had to mature before puberty hit me, taking on particular roles and the trauma that I went through, which I won't divulge into. But then I kind of fast forwarded into puberty, and then it was like, oh, okay, I'm a person that has all these things, and my body is changing, and what's happening to me. And it kind of transitioned straight into uni, where I kind of woke up and was like, oh, okay, I have an identity, and I have all these feelings and things, and I like boys and girls and people, and oh, okay, I'm a Black woman now, how do I navigate my life? And then it was only until I would say I turned 23 that I kind of became aware, like fully aware, and became fully into myself in my growing up and the kind of whistle stop journey of me. For a long time I would say that I was quite passive. I was quite a doormatty type of person, and I came through bullying and all of that, and for a long time I just didn't know how to find my voice. And then, yeah, like I said, uni happened, and I was able to work with some inspirational women like Amara Frifa, Kelechi Okafor, to
yeah,
really state my foster mother until a point in my life where they really lifted me and sort of empowered me to find my voice.
yeah,
um, and I'm proud of that, the sisterhood that I have and the friends that I call friends, and you know my own life. Like I'm just grateful that I'm at a place where like my own womanhood is defined by me. And Mickey Kendall says there is no magic shield in being in a body that's criminalized for existing, and as women's bodies are being policed, as we see in various political spaces, it's empowering that through our own respective journeys, and the people that are in their space, you have your own journey through
yeah.
womanhood.
And
That's
look, that there is, if people want to read something about that really changed my life, is Audre Lorde's The Erotica's Power. Beautiful essay around understanding our own sense of identity, because there is, that she's also wrote an essay called
yeah,
Poetry is Not a Luxury,
yeah,
because it was about being able to find those things that enable us to be ourselves.
yeah,
However, a word of caution is,
yeah.
because I went down this route, is
Mm,
that I saw this quote, and sometimes something just wins you.
yeah,
It's fierce independence is a trauma response.
Wow. Wow.
We've got to be careful about going too
Wow.
far the other way and being this fierce, independent,
Yeah.
Black woman as society sees us or anything, because it's also a trauma response. And so our
Yeah.
identities and our relationship with ourselves are fluid, and that
Very.
we constantly change and then constantly evolving, and that's okay. That you as long as we recognize that it's okay to change our mind.
Uh, yeah, 100%. And that's something I had to kind of come to terms with, because the way I kind of, my early years, there wasn't a space for me to kind of think outside of what I was being kind of conditioned to with my environment. So what you say about like it's okay to sort of change yourself and redefine yourself, that was literally from 23 onwards. That's, the Chantal you're seeing, that's fearless, that doesn't have two minds to tell someone professionally to keep themselves in check.
Yeah.
That all came from, really redefining myself and seeing life in its essence. But yeah, I wish I had more time. Gosh, anyways.
Well, I think look, let's open it. Let's
Yeah,
open it for the questions. And I just want to go back to that last bit you said about professionally telling someone to keep themselves in check. That's okay,
yeah,
to be open and transparent and have those conversations.
yeah,
And at the same time, we also need to look at, and it's a lesson that I've learned,
yeah,
and it's also, we also have to look at why we feel that we want to say it and when. And sometimes it's also okay to go, you know what, I'm not going to say it now.
yeah,
Because it's going back to what we said at the beginning, when you work for an organization, and I take this, Simon and I have had lots of conversations about this. There are things that happen in the world, and Simon usually gets a WhatsApp message from me going, I feel like we should say something. We need to do something,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah. And then we have to have the conversation about, is it appropriate, given what we are doing, the bigger mission of the organization? Is it
mm,
appropriate for me and him as chair and CEO or the organization to
yeah,
have something? And sometimes it's about working out that we need to make a sacrifice of, well, I say sacrifice. We need to be smart about thinking the way that we do it. And so sometimes you can do things in a very different way. So sometimes a photo,
yeah,
a photo versus a public statement may be
yeah,
something different. But
yeah.
look, we've got a few minutes. Let's get some questions in.
Fantastic. So, first question we have is, Ada, I can listen to you speak all day. Pursuing activism and social justice is often an exhausting mission. How do you look after your mental health?
Great question. So I dance. I will stick on some music. I love music and I have a very beautiful relationship with it. So I dance. I have people who love and care for me. So I will just say, I need a hug. I need a cuddle. I have, I love a bath, and I have these, I'll send you the link, self-care candles. They're beautiful because they burn for 20 minutes. And so what I do is I'll have a bath, stick the candle on, and I won't do anything. No reading. I won't look at my phone. I won't do anything. I just watch the flame burn for 20 minutes. And it just allows me to drop into my space, go into nature, go for hikes. Now I've got into exercising, not always the best in the morning, but I feel the getting up bit is difficult. Once I'm doing it, it's fine.
Yeah.
But the mental health thing is, and I say the mental health thing, and I don't mean that. What I mean is we have to talk about what's happening to us.
Hmm.
We have to talk, and whether it's to friends or a therapist or, mental health first aiders, we have to talk because we need that support.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in isolation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Next question we've got is, how do you think women and those who identify as women can be better allies for other women and those who identify as women? What? The question, okay, so the question is, I'm going to read it without the brackets. How do you think women can be better allies for other women?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, and so I'm taking that as how those who society sees as women, those who identify as women, including trans women and non-binary people within that whole thing, because there are so many social constructs in it.
Mhm.
So there was an exercise that I do sometimes with my clients, which is around circle of trust. So if you, and the way that you do it is write down 5 people within the work environment who you trust.
Yeah.
And you look at education, background. So did they all go to, Russell Group universities? Did they, or what was their upbringing? Where did they live? Did they have, what type of holidays did they take as childhood? Blah, 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 blah. And you get this list and sometimes you start to notice that there's this sameness,
Yeah.
right? Then do it for your outside, do it for your social groups. And if you notice that the people that you trust are people who have a similar lived experience than you, that look like you, that all of that thing, then I would get you to question, how am I being an ally if only I understand sameness? And what that means then is you now need to step outside of your comfort zone and you need to educate yourself. Don't ask other people necessarily to give you their lived experience. There are enough people who've written books sharing their lived experience, but you need to step outside and really mix with different people and understand and get to know, not as research subjects, because nobody's here to be a research subject for anybody else, but to step outside and go, I need to, I am choosing to try and understand and empathize and have compassion for different
Yeah.
lived experiences. And I am not centering that on me. So
Yeah.
the indignation of going, oh, well, that was a racist incident and I'm going to tell them, and when it's not yours, is also not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's recognizing that sometimes your voice, your indignation, your anger, frustration is not appropriate, because
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're centering it on yourself. And I mean that not just as in race, in all areas.
Yeah.
So ask, don't tell.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ada. One person says, this wasn't a question, but they shared, work is needed on how society views a woman's worth, and to not base this on the views on status such as marriage and motherhood, and instead celebrate the woman that they are.
Yeah.
Agree.
So
Um,
there's a reference, there's a book there, what's it called? The Hidden Women. There's a book by Carolyn Carrido, something or other, called Hidden Women. Brilliant. There's also, I had started working with a woman at the UN. We got very busy, but the idea, if you really want to understand how society sees women, recognize that most of the work that women do, and I'm
mhm.
not talking about office work, is not recognized by GDP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So GDP is a broken model because it only recognizes certain things. So example of the book, Caroline Credo's book, is that, if you're working in I'll use advertising agencies because they're the ones I work with mostly.
Yeah.
So when you are senior leadership and you go to, and they say, right, the leadership team is going to go away and we're going to go to this conference, and the men go and book their places to go, the woman, usually the mother, then also has to pay for childcare.
Yeah.
And so she can't claim childcare as part of her thing. And so it then means that you have an added burden. So it's looking at what these things are, where those hidden additional things that as women we have that aren't taken into consideration, that is part of us being able to show up and do the work.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you so much, Ada. Another question that's come in is, how do you not get overwhelmed with all the issues facing all of the different groups that you are connected to? Do you have any advice for keeping on top of it all?
Withdraw. I withdraw sometimes. I am ambivert, but more I'd say more introvert. So when I do a talk, I usually, especially if it's in person, then I usually have to be still. And
Mhm.
I will not talk to anybody. I won't read anything. I just need to stop. Having good boundaries,
Amazing.
and managing expectations. And it's a fine balance when you work at an organization where it's part of your role to do these things as well.
Mhm.
Because I remember somebody was saying that somewhere, I think in one of the recent conversations, was about, as an organization, we're a family. And I went, you need to read the book by Patty McCord that is about the Netflix culture, where she talks about it's not family. You're not families, your teams, your sports teams. And
Mhm.
everybody has a responsibility to look after themselves and make sure that they are in the best state possible to
Mhm.
be able to stay on the team. If
Yeah,
not, you recognize that you may be cut from the team. And
yeah,
so it's understanding that it's a multifaceted thing of, yes, organizations have a duty of care to us, but we also have a duty of care to ourselves, and we have to be open and honest with ourselves about when it's too much.
mhm.
And that means that sometimes it's talking therapy, sometimes it's these things. And I've pulled back from a lot of the communities I was running because I was being pulled in too many spaces.
Yeah,
And going, look, the perfect analogy, right?
yeah,
When you're on an aeroplane and they say the oxygen masks are going to drop down, what do they say? You got to put your own on first before you
yeah,
do anybody else's. So don't look at it as selfishness, it's self-preservation. But it
yeah,
also means you have to be able to show up for the thing that you've committed to a
yeah,
certain extent. And
yeah,
so it takes being totally honest with yourself
yeah, yeah,
and going, not, you can try and lie to everybody else, you can't lie to yourself.
yeah,
So you have to go, look, am I able to do this in the way that I know that I'm supposed to or want to, what have you? If you choose to do things that don't match your values and or your capacity, then first and foremost, be honest with yourself.
yeah,
It's okay to go, I can't do this anymore,
yeah, yeah.
or I
No,
don't want to.
yeah. No, it's true. Thank you so much. The final question in the Slido before I kind of want you to
Yeah.
wrap up and share a word of inspiration is, as chair, what would you like to see MHFA England do to be inclusive of all women across their life cycle? Can you give us an example of what you think we do well and what you would like us to improve?
Well, because one of your earlier questions, I think when you sent the questions over to me was about legacy.
Yeah.
And so going into, as I said at the beginning, my thing is about what type of ancestor do you want to be? The reason I asked that question is because we're ancestors now, not some years down the line. And so everything we do is about being very conscious of the decisions that we make or the ones that we choose not to make. And so part of my legacy with MHFA England has first of all been responding and saying, yes, I'm going to put my hand in.
Yeah.
And then also, you know, helping us to navigate through the pandemic, which was devastating in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had to make, as a business and an organization, as all businesses and organizations, some very difficult, heartbreaking decisions had to be made
Hmm.
that I've never had to make before,
Yeah.
and recognizing that in making those decisions, you also have to look after yourself and go, look, what am I trying to say? My legacy and the things that we do well, the things that I asked us to do in the beginning is I said to Simon, we need to be, and the board, as an organization, we need to believe our own hype. We're amazing. And I don't think when we started, we really kind of, my perception as an outsider was we didn't believe that.
Mm.
And I didn't believe that I said that we have to believe our own hype. We are great at what we do, and we are part of a bigger unit of that. And so when it comes to more specifically International Women's Day, I believe that we are working towards it. We are, policies and language. So some of the first things I did was get us to change our language
Hmm.
about how we talk about people and how we refer to people and give people agency to be able to choose.
Hmm.
Um, I feel that what else do we do? You know, we have created a brand and an identity that is global
Hmm.
in ways that we don't recognize. So I've been on holiday and beaches in Europe and chatting to people. And I remember this woman, we were at a bar on the beach, And we were chatting, and I said, "Oh yeah, Mental Health First Aid England, I'm the chair." She went, "Oh my God, I absolutely love what you do. I'm an MHFA there, and blah blah blah." And she goes, "You know that we are a beacon for how we work with our staff." So
Mm,
there are so many organizations that don't have the wellness, the well-being weeks and all of the things that we're doing.
mm,
They are they are powerful. They are inspirational, and they are making a difference. And it's what I've learned is it's a really fine balance between desire and capacity.
yeah.
And it's you when you are responsible for governing and leading an organization, you have to look at how can we ensure that we bring the whole organization together.
Mm,
And I feel that we have, I believe, and I feel that we have done a lot with what we've had. There can always be more in any organization, in anything. We can all strive to be better at what we do and what we want to do and how.
yeah.
I think it's important to also keep ourselves learning and growing
100%. Yeah.
and recognizing that we are human.
Hmm.
So I remember one of the first talks I gave at all staff after the pandemic was I joined the all staff meeting, and I said, look, I really want to thank, and from my heart, thank people for our resilience
Yeah.
and for showing up, constantly showing up and everything. And I want us to remember that we are an organization of humans who are complex and messy and sometimes get it wrong. And
Mm,
that's part of being human. And so no organization is 100%, and but I am truly proud of who we are, truly proud of what we do. And
mm,
I talk about it, and I use us as an example when I talk in every single talk that I do around the world. I talk about us, and I
yeah.
talk about how we are not afraid of going, I don't know, but
Yeah.
let's work it out, and let's talk, and let's be transparent, and let's have the difficult conversations, which is why my door's open. If people want to talk to me, they can do. Some
Mhm.
staff have reached out to me directly to have a chat. I'm okay with that. And
Yeah.
also okay with going, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's okay, but we'll try.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ada, with what you've shared there. A couple of things to note in terms of what we've done as an organisation. We are a disability confident employer. We have also signed both the Menopause Charter and the Halo Code against hair-based discrimination in the workplace. We've also been awarded as a great place to work for women in
Yes, we have.
2023. And also we have our instructor member development program series, which is tailored to various learning events, which I believe last week you had a session,
Yeah.
Ada, on menopause. So there's bits and pieces, but as you
And
shared,
we added the anti-racism bit to our training. There are many things that we have done that are inspirational and
yeah,
are helping us to grow.
amen to that. Just before I close off,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I feel like it's just in my fashion, isn't it? We're running a little bit later, but to those who are in the space, thank you for staying. If not, there's recording. You can access the final few minutes. But before we close off, I just want to thank Erin, Stefan, Ada, yourself, Simon, and Alicia for all of your support in
And
pulling
yourself.
together.
Thank you,
Oh, and
Chantal.
myself, I
Yeah,
did
of
that.
course.
But thank you all to coming into this space. But I want to, and I hope that people feel inspired. I'm sorry that time has kind of escaped us. I feel like if we had more time, we could have dived so much more into deeper discourse. But to kind of follow on that inspiration peak, Ada, you've mentioned, your legacy piece is inspiring people in asking what ancestor they want to be. If you want to share a final word of encouragement to inspire the audience here on the people that they want to be, the ancestors that they want to be, yeah, feel free to inspire away.
Wow. Um, I think to always remember the thing that makes you who you are,
Hmm.
that not everybody has to get it,
Hmm.
that it's a very personal journey, that if you are very clear about what your values are,
Yeah.
and remember who you are outside of the labels and the social construct, then that's a great start.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I do is I constantly go back in and I check in with myself and also go, where's my ego getting in the way? Because
Yeah.
my ego, we've all got egos, right?
Yeah.
And that could be show up in the way of I'm annoyed that you didn't do what I wanted or respond in the way that I wanted, because
Mhm.
that is about control. So recognizing these are my values.
Yeah.
So I turn work down because if it with organizations that don't match my values, but I'm in a privileged position to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
recognize and remember your values, the things that make you who you are,
Mhm.
and have fun with it. Have fun. There can be fun and there can be laughter in even the difficult times, you know.
Yeah.
And if you want to chat to me, I'm around.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ada. Just to add on to that, what you've shared in terms of having fun with it and just sort of finding yourself, I identify with the many hats that I wear. Out of the MHFA space, outside of that, I like to say to folks, I like to inspire thought. I know I like to provoke thought, conversation, and racist. Doesn't have to be in that order. I've done one of
Yeah.
those. I'm happy with that. And in my short 26 years of life, I've had people tell me that I can't be a significant voice for race in the UK. I've had people tell me that they don't want to think of race, they don't want people to think of me when they think of race equity. I've had a multitude of things where, you know, I've
Yeah,
learned
and you know
that
what?
through those experiences that I clearly shake the table, and I say that to say that, in your legacies and my kind of final inspirational pieces, don't be afraid to shake consciousness. Don't be afraid to shake tables of people that don't get you, because, like you say, people won't get it, and that's absolutely okay.
Yeah, well, yes, and but sometimes it's okay just to let them not get you. You don't have to
Mhm.
shake every table. You don't have to shake every tree, because there are how many millions of people in the world, and it's about recognizing sometimes that you don't get me, that's okay. I don't need to spend my energy. And this is one of the beauties about turning 50 and menopausal, right? Is that you get to a stage in life where you're like, I do not have the time or the inclination for that nonsense. I am not going to put my effort and energy into trying to convince you of something that you have no
Yeah.
interest in.
Yeah.
So, yes, while yes, I hear you, I also, something that comes with age and experience as well,
Mhm.
is that you just go, it's okay, you don't get me. I'm
Yeah.
not going to spend my energy shaking you to try and get you to understand me or to see things the way that I do.
Yeah.
Can I put my energy that is going to be appreciated or recognized in a particular way?
Yeah.
Okay, over there. And I will do it that way.
100%.
So it's both.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I shake tables, I do it from the sense of like, you don't like what I'm doing and you don't identify that. And that's okay, as you've just shared. But I'm going to make a point of still shaking the table because I know I can, and I have the right to take up space, So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. I will say it's a yes and. It's
yeah.
a yes and because it's a yes and because you can. And you can also go, you know what, I'm not going to do it this place. And that's how my career has changed.
Mm,
But anyhow, look, we could talk forever.
we could talk
Thank
forever.
you all for staying on the extra
15 minutes.
time. Thank you, Chantal.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, for showing, and all the team behind. And have a wonderful International Women's Day. And because it's not just a day.
Yeah, literally, yes, and but yeah, there'll be a recording shared. It will be available at some point in time. Stay tuned for the newsletter and on the online learning hub. I will try and send all the stuff in terms of how you can find Ada, how you can connect with Ada as well. But I sincerely hope that with the rushing around trying to get everything in the space, that you have taken something away that has been inspiring and that has also enriched your perspective and knowledge of International Women's Day. Yeah, and I hope that you are going to hashtag inspire inclusion. That was so cheesy. But anyway.
And I saw you do the hashtag.
Yeah. I did. So cheesy. Anyway,
Thank you, Chantal. It's been great. And it's been great getting to know you as well over this period, especially over this period of time.
thank you so much. Thank you. But yeah,
Great.
to more work and to more connection. And yeah, I'll let you guys go now. Please, or folks, go enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And yeah, I'll see you all very soon.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. All right. Take care. Thanks, Chantal. Do you want to have a wash up?
Yes.